Phi Nguyen and I'm your host on Inside Vietnam.
This is a fantastic market because of the strength of the population.
You have to Vietnamize your content here.
I would tell them to come on board, tell them what they like, or give them what they like.
Vietnam is a very, very dynamic and exciting market.
A very warm welcome back to Inside Vietnam to you all. My name is Phi Nguyen and I'm your host on Inside Vietnam. In our last interview with Mr. Ralph Matthes, MD of TNS Vietnam, we have addressed the issue of Vietnam being one of the top 10 emerging markets globally. We mentioned the acronyms BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and CVET, which stands for Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Turkey, and South Africa. Well, there are a lot of economic factors involved in identifying prominent emerging markets, one of which is certainly the extremely young population, one of the key drivers of economic growth rate. We are joined today by Ms. Hoa Mai, Research Director of the Nielsen Company, who will be unveiling a lot of the myths about the young consumers of Vietnam. Hoa will take us on a journey to gain insights into the attitude, values, beliefs, aspirations, and most importantly, product and brand selection of one of the key market segments in Vietnam, one that holds Vietnam's future consumerism. Good day to you, Hoa, and thank you very much for being on the show with us.
My pleasure.
Well, as you may have been aware, global emerging markets share very similar characteristics in terms of youthful culture. Take, for example, the countries that I have been to. China presents about 51% of the population under 30, India about 54% under 25, and Turkey about 46% under 25. So those are really phenomenal figures. And Vietnam has no exception. Vietnam has got a 55%. What is your impression towards this figure?
Well, it's not really surprising because everybody has been saying that Vietnam has very young population. 55% of Vietnam population are under 30 years old. And if you look at 13 to 30 years old, that's probably about 35% of total population.
So in your opinion, do you see similarities and differences between the youth group across the emerging markets in the world?
Yeah, from my experience working with marketers from neighboring countries like China or Thailand or India, they all share the same perspective that young consumers are the most diverse, fast changing, and also complicated subgroups. They are in the transition stage from traditionalism to westernization, from collectivism to individualism. But wherever you go, then the young consumers still represent a huge potential for marketers.
And I understand that youth is defined as people from 13 to 30 years old. Is that the case for the Nielsen Company?
Yes, definitely yes.
Isn't that trying to bundle the very different groups within the 13 to 30 years of age into one umbrella and saying, okay, if I'm a teenager or I'm a 30-year-old sort of youngster, I share the same characteristics and values?
13 to 30 years old is quite a wide age bracket, right? And that's why in Nielsen and in many other studies that we do at young consumers, we tend to split them into three groups. One is teenagers from 13 to 17 years old, and then we have 18 to 22 years old who are more likely to be young adults who are still at university, and then 23 to 30 years old who have entered the workforce. And these are what we often call the first jobbers.
So you actually categorize the 13 to 30 into three different subgroups. Let's talk about the first one, which is my favorite.
Right.
Teenagers.
Yeah, that's my favorite too.
And these are kids probably in secondary and high school, not studying very hard or studying very hard, I don't know. What are the characteristics of this group, do you think?
Well, Vietnamese teenagers are the most impulsive and the most experimentative group of consumers. As you said, right now their priority in life is to have fun rather than studying.
I like that.
And they have a strong urge to express their identity to the whole world.
Yeah.
They want to be the center of attention, the navel of the universe.
Yeah.
And they do that, they express themselves via almost anything.
Yeah.
Their fashion style, the accessories that they have,
Yeah.
high tech,
Yeah.
kind of gadgets, cool. They are the most kind of adaptive
Yeah.
and also experiment-sensitive group.
How does that affect the way that they select brands and products in Vietnam?
For marketers, you can attract them quite easily by building up a cool, aspirational kind of image.
Yeah.
Then there you go. You can grab their hearts easily.
I understand that this subgroup doesn't have their own money. So with that money, which means that with that spending power, what sort of impact do you think this group have on the market?
Well, you're right when you're saying that they don't have much money. Because in a recent Gen V study that we did, when we interviewed teenagers from 15 to 24 years old, and then we asked them the average spending per week, then they gave us a figure about 275,000 dong per week. They are big spenders on categories such as foods and beverages. And don't forget that they also spend on other non-necessities like entertainment.
Let me interrupt you there and talk about the 257,000 dong per week that you mentioned.
Yes.
Now 270,000 dongs a week equals about 1 million a month in pocket money. Is that right?
Roughly. Yeah.
How do you arrive at that figure though? What sort of income classes are you tracking?
We were looking at A to D household income bands, and at Nielsen we define A, B, C, D based on their household income on a monthly basis. And A would be 15 million Vietnam dong and above, and D is about 3 to 4.5 million Vietnam dong per month.
So if I'm taking class D, for example, understandable that it would be from about 4 million dong per month in household income. That would mean that they will take 25% of their income, which is 1 million versus 4 million, for the kids' pocket money. Is that what you're saying, or?
Well, not really. The figure that I mentioned, that's the average on household income bands. If you look at the household income band only, that amount would be obviously smaller.
Okay. Let's move on and talk about the second subgroup that you mentioned, the young adults from 18 to 22 years old. So what have you got for me to talk about this particular subgroup?
Well, yes, they're still young, but they are less impulsive than the teenagers, of course, because they are now at universities.
They are
and they're
more
ready
mature,
to,
you're saying?
Exactly, yeah. And they want to portray themselves as grown-up adults.
So the frivolous needs of being cool and being made a center of the universe has been replaced by maturity.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. And how does that affect the brand and product selection of this particular subgroup?
Well, because they now care more about quality. So you just can't fool them around with a cool kind of imagery. That's not enough, because they will question what's in it for them. So for marketers, you need to be ready with a good product story. So tell them about the ingredients, the benefits, what's in it for them at the end of the day. And then wrap it up with an attractive, aspirational kind of imagery.
When you mention the word quality, do you mean that the product has to have certain level of quality level, or is it more towards delivering the benefits that will suit them in their particular needs for their stage?
I think it's both. It's both promising good qualities and also delivering it up to the expectations. The key influences on their purchase decision would be word of mouth. And word of mouth here would come from their peers, the friends, the circles of friends that they have. And then TVC, or what we call the TV advertisements, would be the second most influential.
So for this particular subgroup versus the teenagers, they are both under peer pressure, are you saying?
Peer pressures are common across all age brackets in Vietnam.
So having said that, is this particular subgroup having any significant impact for advertisers in Vietnam?
For advertisers and marketers, as I said, quality is the key focus on top of the imagery. They are in the transition stage, right, from teenagers to working adults. And when they become working adults, they will have more financial power to spend. So it's still critical to grab them, include them in the target consumers.
And the third subgroup that you mentioned before, the 23 to 30 years old,
Yes.
I would imagine that this particular subgroup is very different from the first two.
Well, a lot of differences, I would say,
Yeah.
because they are now having more financial independence. They start earning their own income, and they are ready to spend, and they love to spend. This spending is also one way to express who they are, to tell the whole world that, hey, I'm now totally independent.
Yeah.
And they are the most conscious group of consumers on quality.